I'm not wearing a penguin suit, Dad, Oliver huffed, crossing his arms as he stood in their cramped kitchen, a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich on the chipped counter beside him. You'll wear the bow tie or no video games for a week, Emmett Lawson replied, trying to iron his only decent white button-down on the narrow kitchen table. The iron sputtered once before dying. Of course. Oliver groaned dramatically, then grabbed the bow tie. This catering job better be worth it. It had to be. Emmett had picked up the last-minute gig through a friend of a friend one night, high-end event, cash in hand. He hadn't asked too many questions. When you're behind on rent, your car's making a sound that can only mean doom, and your 8-year-old son needs new shoes, you take what you can get. By 6:30, Emmett was parking his beat-up Toyota around the corner from a mansion that looked like it had been stolen from a movie set. The driveway alone was probably bigger than their whole apartment complex. White stone steps led up to towering glass double doors, and behind them, people in black suits and glittering dresses sipped champagne under chandeliers bigger than their entire living room. "Whoa," Oliver whispered, eyes wide as he clutched Emmett's hand. "Stay close, okay?" Emmett said, adjusting his blazer and grabbing the catering tray from the backseat. "You hang in the kitchen with the other staff. I'll be in and out." "Got it. I won't touch anything rich people, why?" The kitchen staff barely noticed him as he slipped in, handed Oliver over to a matronly woman in her 50s who offered him a cookie, and loaded up his tray with tiny hors d'oeuvres on silver spoons. The catering manager barked a few quick instructions: keep moving, smile, don't speak unless spoken to, and Emmett was off. The party was a gala of some kind. He caught snippets of conversation about mergers and IPOs, and something about a philanthropic fund. Everyone looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Emmett felt like a fraud in his scuffed shoes and threadbare shirt, but he kept his head down and moved through the crowd like he was invisible. Until she saw him. "Excuse me," a woman's voice said, firm but low. Emmett turned, nearly dropping his tray. She was standing by the grand piano, tall with dark waves pulled into a sleek bun, wearing a navy dress that shimmered under the lights. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and locked on him. She didn't look like the others. Sure, she was dressed like money, but there was something else, something grounded. He straightened. "Yes, ma'am." She picked up one of the appetizers with delicate fingers and studied him for a beat too long. "You're not one of their regular servers." "No, ma'am, just covering last minute." He cleared his throat. "Friend of a friend." Her lips curved up, not in a condescending way, but with genuine amusement. "You don't have to call me ma'am. It makes me feel like I'm 40. "You're not?" he asked before he could stop himself. She laughed, a real, warm laugh that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. "I'm 31, and you are?" "Emmett Lawson." "Nice to meet you, Emmett Lawson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Presley Zane." She didn't say what she did, but the way people shifted around her, the way the room tilted slightly toward her wherever she stood, it told him everything. She was the host. He took her hand carefully, suddenly hyper-aware of the calluses on his palm against her smooth skin. "Nice to meet you, too." Presley's gaze flicked toward the kitchen briefly. "You brought your son tonight." Emmett blinked. "How did you?" "He was peeking out the kitchen door when you walked in. Same eyes." He let out a breath. "Yeah, Oliver. I couldn't find a sitter on such short notice." Her head tilted slightly. "That's sweet. Most people wouldn't bring their kid to a party like this." "Most people have options," he said before he could catch the edge in his voice. But Presley didn't flinch. "Well, I think it's admirable." He didn't know what to say to that. Then someone called her name, and she gave him a quick smile before turning away, leaving him standing there like the floor had just shifted under him. Over the next hour, he saw her again, and again. She always seemed to be where he was. sometimes alone, sometimes with a drink, always watching him with that same quiet curiosity. Once, she caught him dancing with Oliver in the kitchen while he waited for the next round of trays. Her eyes softened. Later, after most of the guests had gone, she found him again by the kitchen door, unbuttoning his collar, cheeks flushed from working nonstop. "You look like you could use a drink," she said. He gave a tired smile. "I'm guessing the champagne's not for the help." "I own the building. I think I can bend a rule." She handed him a glass and leaned against the counter beside him. The rest of the staff buzzed around them, but somehow the noise faded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. "Why are you really here tonight? You don't seem like the catering type." He took a sip. "I've worked a lot of jobs. Construction, maintenance, delivery, you name it. This one paid cash and I needed it." "For your son." "Yeah, he's everything." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I grew up with nothing." That caught him off guard. He turned to her. "I know how hard it is," Presley added, "to work twice as hard and still feel like you're barely keeping up." "What changed for you?" "I built a tech company when I was 23. Everyone said I'd fail. I didn't." He whistled low. "So you're CEO of Zane Innovations." He nearly choked on his drink. "Are you serious?" She laughed again. "I get that a lot." Suddenly, the night made more sense. The gala, the media, the way people hovered around her like she was royalty. And yet, here she was, talking to him like he mattered. "You're kind of a big deal," he said. "So are you," she replied, eyes flicking toward the kitchen where Oliver's laugh echoed. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just beautiful, she was real, strong, sharp. And for some reason, she was looking at him like he wasn't just some guy passing out canapés. "I should go," he said, setting the glass down. "Oliver's probably falling asleep in the pantry." "Wait," she said, grabbing a napkin and scribbling something on it. She handed it to him. "Call me." He stared at the number, then at her. "Seriously?" he asked. "Seriously," she said, already walking away. "Next time we'll have dinner, not just tiny spoons." He watched her disappear into the glittering hallway, heart thudding like someone had just cracked it open and dropped something unexpected inside. He looked at the number again. Maybe, just maybe, his luck was about to change. The napkin stayed folded in Emmett's wallet for 3 days. He saw it every time he reached for his debit card or counted out cash for groceries, its edges slightly crumpled, the ink from her writing faintly smudged from his thumb. Not that he needed to look. He'd memorized the number the moment she handed it to him. But dialing it, that was another thing entirely. 3 days after the gala, he was back on a ladder, fixing a water-damaged ceiling in an old brownstone. His arms ached, his jeans were flecked with paint, and his phone buzzed beside the toolbox. It was his sister. "Oliver's fine," she said before he could ask. "We're building a pillow fort. I just wanted to make sure you weren't planning to work through the weekend again." "I've got bills, Sadie." "You've also got a kid who misses you when you're patching holes, until 9 every night." He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing down at the wallet in his tool belt. "I met someone." That pulled a pause from the other end. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I worked an event. She was hosting it." "You met a rich woman at a party you weren't even supposed to be invited to." Emmett laughed under his breath, something like that. "Is she nice?" "She gave me her number." Sadie's voice softened, "Then stop wasting time and call her." By the time he knocked off work and picked Oliver up, his nerves were stretched taut. He fed his son, helped him finish a math worksheet, and as soon as Oliver was tucked into bed, He stepped out onto the fire escape with his phone, the evening air cool against his skin. He dialed. It rang once. Twice. Presley Zane. He cleared his throat. It's Emmett from the other night. There was a beat of silence. Then, I was wondering if you'd call. I wasn't sure if you meant it. You're not the type to waste time on guessing games. I liked that. He leaned against the railing. You said something about dinner. Was that just party talk? No, I don't say things I don't mean. There was a pause and then she added, tomorrow night. I'll send a car. He hesitated. I don't usually do car services or anything like this. You'll be fine, wear something comfortable, but maybe not paint-stained. He glanced down at his shirt and laughed. I'll see what it can do. The next evening, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside his building. Emmett had never worn a tailored jacket in his life, but Sadie had insisted he borrow one from her husband, and after some minor tailoring at a local dry cleaner that owed him a favor, it fit well enough. The driver didn't speak much, just opened the door and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten card, "Come hungry." He arrived at a quiet rooftop garden above a building downtown, the air filled with the scent of citrus trees and fresh basil. String lights crisscrossed above a long wooden table set for two. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a flashy venue. It felt personal. Presley was already there, her dark hair pulled over one shoulder, wearing a soft blouse and jeans that somehow still looked expensive. She was barefoot. He hadn't expected that. I was hoping you'd show, she said, motioning toward the table. I almost didn't, he admitted, taking the seat across from her. I wasn't sure what this was. It's dinner, she said simply, and a chance to find out if I like you as much without the bow tie. A chef appeared from a small adjoining kitchen, placing fresh pasta and roasted vegetables between them without interrupting. Emmett watched Presley pour wine into 2 glasses, entirely at ease in a way that didn't match the boardroom image he'd expected. So, she said, handing him a glass, you're a single dad who moonlights as a contractor and moonlights as a caterer. What else don't I know? He gave a half smile. I used to play baseball, got a scholarship to a state school, then my dad got sick and I came home, never went back. Her expression shifted, more thoughtful now. Do you miss it? All the time, but it got Oliver. That's better. Presley nodded slowly. My dad left when I was 12. Decided then I'd never need anyone who could walk away. That landed hard between them, heavier than the wine or the food or the garden air. How'd you start your company? He asked, changing the subject gently. Built an app in college, sold it, used the money to start Zane Innovations. Everyone thought it was a fluke. I spent years proving them wrong. You always this confident. She laughed once. I learned early that if I didn't believe in myself, no one else would. They ate in easy silence for a while after that, the kind that didn't need filling. She told him about an investor who once tried to buy her out behind her back. He told her about the time Oliver tried to make grilled cheese in the toaster. They laughed, traded stories, and somewhere between dessert and the second glass of wine, he stopped feeling like he didn't belong here. As the night deepened, he walked with her to the edge of the garden, overlooking the city below. The soft glow of lights reflected in her eyes as she leaned against the railing. This was incredible, he said, his voice quieter now. Presley turned toward him. So you're not going to disappear for another 3 days? Not if you tell me when. I can see you again. She studied him for a moment, then reached out and brushed a loose thread off his sleeve. It was such a small thing, but it made his pulse jump. There's a fundraiser next weekend, she said. Black tie, I'm short one date. He laughed. I barely survived the last one. You'll survive this too. I'll make sure of it. He nodded, and then before he could overthink it, he leaned in. She didn't pull away. Her lips were warm, steady, and for a second, the world around them disappeared. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I've had a lot of men try to impress me. You're the first one who didn't have to." And just like that, Emmett Lawson, who'd spent his entire adult life trying to hold everything together, felt something shift. Not because he'd earned it, but because, for once, someone saw him as enough. The fundraiser was held at the Empire Pavilion, a glass and marble expanse that stretched along the East River like a monument to ambition. Spotlights cut across the night sky, and valets in matching coats ushered guests past velvet ropes into a world Emmett had only ever seen in glossy magazines left behind in waiting rooms. He adjusted the cuffs of his rented tuxedo as he stepped out of the black SUV Presley had sent, the driver having taken Oliver to Sadie's for the night with a bag packed and detailed instructions written in Emmett's own cautious handwriting. His stomach twisted with nerves that had nothing to do with the event and everything to do with the woman waiting inside. Presley had invited him not as a favor, not as some token gesture, but with purpose, and that, somehow, made it more terrifying. He found her just past the entrance, standing at the base of a sweeping staircase. Her gown was deep crimson, bold and unapologetic, the neckline structured, the silhouette sharp. Her hair was pulled back with a few loose strands framing her jaw. She wasn't just elegant, she was commanding. "You clean up well," she said, the corner of her mouth lifting as she looked him over. "I almost didn't recognize myself in the mirror." "Let's hope no one else does either. It'll keep things interesting." They ascended the stairs together, her hand brushing his arm lightly as if anchoring him to her pace. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with warm lighting and the low hum of money in motion deals being hinted at over glasses of Bordeaux, alliances stitched together through half-smiles and strategic compliments. Presley guided him through it all like a current through a river. She introduced him to people with titles he barely understood, each exchange brief but pointed. "This is Emmett Lawson," she said once, to a man with silver hair and a diamond pin on his lapel. "He's a contractor with a better work ethic than the last 3 project managers I fired." The man raised an eyebrow. "You're branching into construction now." "I branch wherever I want." Emmett didn't speak unless prompted. He listened, observed, and cataloged the way people leaned toward Presley like she was gravity itself. When they finally stepped away from the crowd, he exhaled. "Do you always hold court like that?" "I make sure I'm never underestimated," she said, picking up 2 flutes of champagne from a tray. "You'd be amazed how often that happens if I pause for even 1 second." He accepted the glass. "You don't pause much, do you?" "I never learned how," her gaze softened slightly, "until recently." They found a quieter corner near the balcony doors. From there, the city stretched out below them, glittering and alive. Emmett leaned against the railing, the cold metal grounding him. "Do you ever get tired of this?" he asked. "Of the events, the speeches, the posturing." She took a sip, then answered, "No one's ever asked me that." "Well, do you?" "I get tired of pretending I don't." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the faintest wear behind the polish. "Then why keep doing it?" "Because the moment I stop, someone's waiting to take what I built. There's no coasting when you're the one who laid the foundation." He nodded slowly. "I know something about foundations." She turned toward him, eyebrow raised. That sounded dangerously close to a metaphor. "I'm full of surprises." "I'm starting to believe that." They stood in silence for a beat, the city humming beneath them. Then she said, "I Googled you." His stomach tightened. "That bad, huh?" "No arrest records. A few community build projects. You donated materials to a youth center last year." He shrugged. "They were going to shut down the art room. I had leftover drywall. You could have sold it. They needed it more. She studied him like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. You're not impressed by all this, are you? I think it's impressive, he said, but I don't think it makes you impressive. Presley didn't flinch. Careful, Lawson, that almost sounded like a compliment. It was. A waiter passed by, and she set her glass down. Come with me. He followed her through a side door and down a narrow hallway. At the end was a private lounge with velvet armchairs and a fireplace flickering quietly behind a glass screen. Presley closed the door behind them. I needed a breath, she said, and I didn't want to take it alone. Emmett sat across from her, elbows on his knees. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another rich woman playing host. And now I think you're a woman who's been carrying something heavy for a long time and won't let anyone help her set it down. Her response was a whisper. That's not far from the truth. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dense with something unspoken, charged and intimate. She leaned back, her posture less guarded. People love the version of me that wins. They don't know what to do with the one who's scared. What are you scared of? She hesitated, then said, that I'll let someone close and they'll only want the empire, not me. He leaned forward. I don't care about your empire, Presley. I know. She looked away, jaw tightening. That's what makes this harder. He didn't ask what she meant he didn't need to. He could see it, in her eyes, in how carefully she held herself. Power had made her untouchable and lonely. Emmett stood, walked to her, sat beside her this time. I'm not here for what you've built, he said quietly. I'm here for the woman who built it. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached for his hand, her fingers cool against his calloused ones. I don't want this to be temporary, she said finally, but I don't know how to make it fit. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. But we will have to, eventually. He nodded. When we do, we'll do it together. Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if the weight she'd been carrying shifted, just enough to let someone else hold part of it. Would you kiss me again? She asked, her voice barely audible. He didn't answer with words. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about anchoring something real in a world where too much felt like illusion. She pulled back slowly, her forehead resting against his. You make me feel like I can breathe. Then let's keep breathing, he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, Presley Zane let herself be held without armor, without expectation. Just as herself. Presley hadn't touched her office in 2 days. Her assistant had started to panic 3 missed meetings, 2 reschedules, and a board member who thought she might be on the verge of burnout. But Presley wasn't hiding. She was re-evaluating. From her penthouse terrace, she watched the city shift into dusk, the skyline softening as the sun slipped behind towers of glass. She had her laptop open, unread emails blinking like warnings, but her focus was on the laughter coming from the living room. Oliver had built a cardboard spaceship out of delivery boxes and was currently explaining to Emmett why Saturn's rings were cooler than Jupiter's storms. Emmett listened like it was the most important conversation he'd ever had. He wasn't pretending. He never did. Presley closed the laptop without answering a single message. She stepped inside, barefoot across the stone floors, her silk blouse loose over dark jeans. You two planning to launch that thing tonight? Oliver looked up, eyes bright. We still need fuel. Dad says that's your department. Emmett raised an eyebrow. She's the one with all the resources. Presley walked over and handed Oliver a juice box with a grin. Consider your mission funded. As Oliver returned to taping foil to the side of the box, Emmett stood and followed Presley into the kitchen. I should probably take him home soon, he said, glancing back. He's got a spelling test tomorrow. Presley leaned against the counter. You could stay. I have a guest room. Emmett hesitated. Please. You've been careful, she said quietly. I see it. You're trying not to get in too deep. I'm already in deep, he admitted. I just don't want to screw it up. You haven't. He stepped closer. Then why do it still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop? Presley looked down at her hands. Because I haven't told you everything. He waited. I turned down an acquisition offer last week. It would have changed everything, less pressure, more personal time, but I didn't take it. Why not? Because I realized I didn't want to hand over my company, but I also didn't want to keep living like I didn't have anything else. Emmett's gaze locked on hers. And what do you have now? She took a breath. A man care about. A kid who made my entire apartment into a space station. And for the first time, options that aren't just about power. Emmett leaned his hands on the counter beside hers. You scare me, you know. Why? Because I've never wanted something this badly when I had this much to lose. She reached for his hand. Then let's stop thinking about what we might lose. Let's talk about what we want. He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. The next morning, Presley canceled her meetings again. She took Oliver to school with Emmett, standing awkwardly beside him in the drop-off line, wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie that definitely belonged to a 16-year-old version of her. Did that mom just take a picture of you? Emmett asked as they walked back to the car. Probably. I'll end up in some influencer's story titled Tech Queen Trades Boardroom for Bake Sale. He laughed. You sure you want this life? I'm sure I want a life that includes yours. Later that week, she brought Emmett to meet her mother. That was the real test. Her mother lived in a modest townhome on the edge of the city. The woman who'd raised Presley had once worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on and still managed to make dinner every night. She greeted Emmett with a quiet hug and a long, assessing look before nodding once and inviting him in. He's grounded, she said to Presley in the kitchen. I didn't expect that. Presley poured tea. Neither did I. Later, Emmett fixed the loose door on her mother's pantry without being asked. Presley saw the way her mother watched him after that, something in her eyes shifting. Not approval, respect. That night, when they returned to the penthouse, Presley found Emmett on the balcony, his arms folded, city lights reflected in his eyes. You've been quiet, she said, stepping beside him. I've been thinking. Dangerous. He gave a faint smile. You know, I never thought I'd be the kind of man who ended up here, in a place like this, with a woman like you. And what kind of man did you think you'd be? The kind who spent his life fixing other people's problems until he forgot he had any of his own. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. You didn't forget, you just didn't have room to want more. I do now. She turned fully toward him. Then let me give it to you. The next day, she showed him a corner unit in one of her buildings, 3 bedrooms, exposed brick, top-floor views, and a rent price that made Emmett's stomach twist. I can't take this, he said. You're not taking it, you're earning it. I want you to renovate it fully. Your vision, your name on the contract, and I want to invest in your business. He stared at her. You're serious. I don't offer people things they haven't earned. You've earned this, Emmett. He paced once, hands on his hips. This changes everything. It doesn't change us. He stopped, looked at her. What if it does? Then we changed together. A month later, the apartment was done. Emmett had built it like a home, warm, functional, lived in. Oliver had a room with glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. Presley had an open invitation, a drawer of her own, and a place at the dinner table. She still ran her company. Emmett still took jobs, but they did it together, carving out something that wasn't polished or perfectly curated. It was real. One evening, Presley came home late. Emmett was sitting on the couch, sorting through Oliver's school forms. She dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and walked over without a word, curling beside him. He looked up. Long day. She nodded, but I knew exactly how I wanted to end it. He pulled her close, resting his cheek against her hair. You're not just part of my life anymore, Presley. She tilted her head to meet his eyes. You are my life. She didn't cry. She just smiled, kissed him softly, and whispered, then let's keep building it. And they did, together. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of Emmett's newly finished apartment, soft and rhythmic, as if the city itself had slowed its pace to match the quiet inside. Presley stood barefoot on the hardwood floor of the living room, staring at one of the finished walls where a row of framed photos had just been mounted Oliver's crayon drawing of their rocket house. Next to a candid snapshot Emmett had taken of her laughing in the park with Oliver, her eyes half closed, her arm thrown around the boy's shoulders. She hadn't realized he'd printed that one. You hung them, she said as Emmett stepped in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. They belong here. Her gaze lingered on the wall. I've never lived in a place that felt like it remembered things. Emmett came to stand beside her. Maybe that's because this is the first place you're not just visiting. She looked up at him. Do you think this is real, all of it? I know it is. His hand found hers, warm and steady. She leaned into him, letting herself rest for a moment in the quiet certainty of it. Later that evening, Presley sat cross-legged on the couch, sorting through a stack of documents spread across the coffee table. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and she wore one of Emmett's t-shirts that hung far too loose on her shoulders. Emmett walked in after putting Oliver to bed, rubbing the back of his neck. He asked if you'd be at parent-teacher night next week, he said. Presley didn't look up. What did you tell him? That you'd be sitting next to me. She dropped the pen in her hand and leaned back. I've never been to one. There's a first time for everything. She hesitated. I've been thinking about restructuring the company. Emmett sat beside her. What kind of restructuring? Stepping back from the day-to-day, appointing a COO to handle the operations. I'd still be involved, but not like before. I've spent years building something that runs well without me. Maybe it's time I let it. He studied her face. You're not doing this for me, are you? No, she reached for his hand. I'm doing it for me, for us. For the life I want that doesn't involve a 100-hour work week and sleeping in airports. He let out a slow breath. You're serious? I've never been more. A week later, Presley sat in an auditorium filled with paper turkeys and glitter stars. Oliver was on stage, wearing a cardboard crown and reciting a poem about community. She glanced at Emmett, who was recording the whole thing on his phone, his knee bouncing slightly with pride. When the assembly ended, Oliver ran to them, cheeks flushed with excitement. Did I do okay? He asked, looking up at Presley. You were brilliant, she said, crouching to hug him. You made me proud. He beamed, then turned to Emmett. Can we get pizza? Emmett ruffled his hair. Only if you let Presley pick the toppings. Oliver groaned but nodded. Okay, but no mushrooms. They left the school hand in hand, Presley holding one of Oliver's drawings in her free hand, a crooked house with 3 stick figures in front. A boy, a man, and a woman with big hair and high heels. That night, Presley stood in the small rooftop garden of their building, now lit with simple string lights and a few potted herbs Emmett had planted. He joined her with 2 mugs of tea. I submitted the paperwork today, she said, accepting hers. For the restructure. She nodded. It's done. He sipped his tea. How do you feel? Light. She turned toward him, her voice lower now. I thought had to be the empire to be worth anything. Turns out, I just needed to be someone who could love and be loved back. He brushed a piece of hair behind her ear. And you are. She stepped closer, her hand on his chest. There's something else. He tilted his head. What? She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He blinked. Presley. I'm not asking you to marry me, she said quickly, opening the box to reveal a silver key. I'm asking you to let me fully into your life. No more guest drawers, no more maybe after bedtime stories. I want this, all of it. He stared at the key, then at her. You're giving me my own home and asking to share mine at the same time. Exactly. He took the key and closed the box. Then, I have something for you too. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Presley opened it, a deed in both their names. The apartment, fully renovated, now belonged to both of them. She stared at it, speechless. You said you wanted to be part of something that remembered, he said, so I made sure it would. She stepped forward and kissed him, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but gave everything. They pulled apart only when Oliver called from the kitchen, asking if he could have one more cookie. Presley laughed against Emmett's shoulder. One, she called back. Emmett wrapped an arm around her waist. You're going to be the soft one, aren't you? Not a chance, she said, smiling. I'm just in a good mood. He looked at her for a long, quiet second. I love you. She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. I know you do. And you. I've loved you since I saw you dancing with your son in a kitchen full of silver spoons. They kissed again, the city below them, their world above it. Years later, the garden bloomed fuller, the apartment walls filled with new drawings and photographs, family trips, school projects, lazy Sunday mornings. Emmett's business grew with Presley's investment, and hers thrived under new leadership that allowed her to be home for bedtime and breakfast. Oliver started middle school with a science fair project that accidentally shorted out the apartment's power for an hour. Emmett fixed it. Presley laughed so hard she cried. They lit candles and ate takeout while Oliver read his project aloud by flashlight. On their 5th anniversary, Presley gave Emmett a leather tool belt with his initials engraved. Inside one of the pouches was a tiny velvet box with a simple platinum band. He didn't even have to ask. She said yes before he opened his mouth. And this time, he was the one who cried. They were never perfect, but they were home, together. Always.